All right, welcome in everyone. It is Monday, though it doesn't feel like a Monday with daytime basketball and all these games today. But it's time for Full Court Press. I'm joined by my co-host Rob Vino, and we're here to talk hoops. It's going to be I believe, a little bit of an abbreviated show week for us, Rob, because the basketball takes a break finally over the Christmas holiday. They did away with the Diamond Head Classic, which is a little bit sad. I like those random couple of Christmas Day basketball games, but it looks like we've done away with that. So I believe it's today and tomorrow, and then we won't see you guys until next week because there's no games. So we got to make it a great show the next 2 days. And Rob, I know you're thrilled about this. Today, the feature game, I dressed for the occasion, is your Missouri Tigers. And they've got a big one out in St. Louis this afternoon against this evening, I believe, against Illinois. So, talk to me. Is this some sort of a rivalry? Is there a name for this one, Rob? I forget. I feel like it's a rivalry of some sort.
It's a rivalry of sorts. I will say this: a significant amount of the student body at Mizzou goes there from Chicago and surrounding areas, which makes it's kind of a border state. It is a border state, actually. And a lot of kids commute from the state of Illinois, and especially the Chicago area. So it makes for a pretty decent rivalry. It's nowhere
Rob,
near.
I found it. They call it bragging rights. I knew it had a name.
Oh,
they said, yes, it's bragging rights.
You know what? It's written right in front of me, too. And it's not the border war. Let's put it that way. It's not KU, but it is significant. But they play this one every year. And so here we get it in St. Louis, a neutral spot. If you're ever traveling I-70 to Columbia, Missouri, you'll find that St. Louis is kind of a neutral spot between Champaign and Como. What I found interesting here, Adam, and boy, the money got to it quickly. But let's add some coaches to our list of coaches who have no problem sharing their feelings about their team status right now. Let's just start with Brad Underwood. These quotes are priceless. This is after they had just lost and barely lost to Nebraska 83-80. But what Brad Underwood had to say about his team: you look at our front line and there's nothing. You get a horrendous stat line from everybody that played. No rebounds. I mean, there's nothing there. That's on me. That's in practice. That's getting more from them. What I didn't like was our approach to guarding Nebraska. It's a mental tenacity. It's a toughness. It's a grit. We've had that. We had it at Tennessee. We actually had it through most of the Ohio State game, which they actually won that one. But he's not thrilled. And he actually, in practice this week, worked Illinois very, very hard on the defensive aspect of the game. Kylan Boswell, point guard, added to it, saying sometimes we're immature. Comes with being young. It's difficult at times. And in basketball terms, Adam, I'm glad he put it this way, because a lot of times guys don't understand, or bettors don't understand, what bad defense really consists of. Kylan Boswell, we've had a lot of missed switches because we're not talking in transition. We talked about it all week. Don't run to the paint. And this is the difference in basketball now, right? On a fast break transition, don't defensively run to the paint, run to the three-point line. Where Mizzou, for what it's worth, Dennis Gates still figuring out his lineup, added Jacob Cruz to the starting lineup. 53% from three. Jacob Cruz, I mean, he was great last year. He's been even better this year. Part of the starting lineup, using that to help stretch defenses and give Mark Mitchell a little more room to roam. So the spacing is better for Mizzou. But the head coach, Dennis Gates of Missouri, was not happy with his defense either. I mean, Gates all weekend long preached defense. I bring both of these coaches up and what they're looking at, what they're focused on this game, because the total opened 159 and went down to 154.5. If you got there at the opener, congratulations. If you get there now, I still think you might have a little bit of room in this particular game. You look at both of these teams and say 77 aside still doesn't quite get you there. You need a 78-77 game. Very possible. But I think the way these coaches are wired here and what they have their teams focused on, perhaps an under could be a decent play. Sidewise, Adam, I'm not sure. I like them both. I think Missouri's been flawed at times. We know Illinois has been flawed at times, and this is really a kind of a where are we now type of game heading into conference season. I think they'll both get a really good idea of where they're at. I happen to believe Illinois is the more talented team for sure, man for man. If I had to choose rosters, I'd probably pick Illinois' roster. But certainly Mizzou has the capability, and at times they both have the tenacity. My look here early would have been under. At this point, maybe still a little bit of an under. And as for side, I'm going to let you have at it because I really don't have a good indication of which side I'd rather be on here.
Yeah, and I'm almost always going to come up here and talk about the side. And this was the one scenario that I kind of have more of a totals opinion than the side opinion, but very in line with your opinion. I think under makes sense. So something I read this morning that was interesting to me because I've watched this other team play quite a bit, is that the only zone that Illinois saw all year was Colgate. And so that caught my eye quickly because I watch a lot of Colgate basketball. And when I went to the Colgate Sienna game earlier this year, my big takeaway from that game, which I talked about on the show, but my big takeaway from that game was Colgate's 1-3-1 zone and how athletic and quick and good it looked against Sienna because Colgate doesn't have that big plodding 6'10" Shrek-looking center that they had the last couple of years, slowing everything down, right? So they're able to play this super athletic 1-3-1 zone. They stretch pressure a little bit, and that's the only zone Illinois saw this year. I'd have to fact check it, but that was it. And Illinois didn't play. I don't have the final score of that game in front of me, but I don't think, going off of memory, I don't think Illinois had like their best game against Colgate. And so that's I guess in line with sort of you're looking at the under is I think Missouri, Gates is obviously going to play some zone, can maybe slow down Illinois offensively a little bit. But like why I don't have a huge opinion on the side, Rob, is even though unders sort of tend to correlate to underdogs, right? So, and I wore my Missouri sweatshirt, and if you force me into like a lean, I would probably lean that way. And as this gets bet, I'm even more inclined to lean that way because, of course, opened 8, now you're up to 9.5 some places. So on a neutral, after a move like that, I'm definitely inclined to lean the underdog. But my concern is Mizzou isn't going to do a ton against Illinois either. And so that puts puts me on the under than it does the side because I'm worried about Missouri getting good looks in this game as well. And I'm kind of still like on the Illinois bandwagon a little bit, thinking that they could be like, I don't think they get talked about like some of these other like big name top 25 teams do, but they're kind of the one team, one of a couple of teams, Rob, that I think maybe doesn't get the hype that they deserve. Went down to Nashville earlier this year, destroyed Tennessee. Their best result, I feel like I'm leaving out one really good Illinois result. Oh, they beat Texas Tech, and yeah, they those were probably the best result was probably beating Texas Tech. They hung around with Alabama. I still think Illinois can be really good, so I think I'm more with you. I'm looking at the under instead of the side.
Yeah, and I mean, if you just rewind our show back like 3 weeks ago to that Illinois-Texas Tech game, I think the three of us, BP included at the time, we had Illinois in a lot higher status than they sit right now. And that's because of their results from that point to this point. They've kind of lost a little bit of luster in people's power ratings, in people's minds, et cetera, et cetera. But they do, they were injured a little bit at that time, Adam. Let's give Illinois a little bit of credit. They've needed some time to get cohesive with all their bodies. Their main key players in the rotation, all on the court at once. I, too, think, they have Elite 8 caliber ability. What they do here against Mizzou remains to be seen. And I will point out, Illinois is not Kansas defensively. They're not Kansas defensively, but Mizzou did have their struggles against KU. 60 points was all they could score against Kansas in that game, got blown out by 20. So against elite competition, hasn't looked great thus far. Mizzou hasn't played a ton of elite competition so far this season.
Yeah, I think I think we're kind of in agreement. If I had to give out a pick on that game, it would clearly be the under. So, and you agree. So I'm kind of comfortable leaving that one there. Let's do this one, and then we'll go to Garth next, just because this would have been very bold of me to make this the feature. I thought about it, but I couldn't disrespect Illinois Mizzou like that. But my Sienna Saints, Rob, head to Bloomington, Indiana today. Now, they're a 23-point underdog. I would hardly say that that's a feature game, but, there's not many big name top 25 teams playing today. And, I'll point this out. Sienna, it doesn't play these games very often. So they're in a very unique position as a mid-major where they don't need to play a ton of bye games. They crush the MAC in attendance every single year. So you look at that conference, most of those MAC schools get maybe 2,000 a game, 2,500, 2,500. I don't even think Canisius holds more than 2,000, right? Some of those other schools, maybe 900, 1,100. And then obviously Iona gets some people. Fairfield, beautiful new arena. They are getting fans there. A bad night for Sienna down at MVP Arena is 4,500, 5,000. A good night's 8,000. So relative to the rest of their league, they have no problem paying the bills, right? They don't need to schedule these non-D1 opponents. They never play a D2 school, and they very rarely go and play the paycheck game, because these types of games and I'll let you weigh in on this as well. I don't yes, one or two of them may help, but if you're a Sienna, I think you'd much rather play Colgate, Vermont, the top teams from the other leagues that are in the other good leagues. You want to play elite mid-major competition. You don't necessarily want to go on the road as a 30-point underdog and play Indiana. You gain less from that game, but it's a necessity for some schools, not so much Sienna. That's why you don't see many of these. I can't remember the last time, a couple of years back, I think played on the road at Kansas. I know Georgetown was I guess supposed to be a big name team, but that was when Georgetown was really bad. So I'll bring that up because Sienna goes to Bloomington today, a 22-point underdog. It was up to 24, got hit back down to 22. I have mixed feelings just because off of memory, I know Sienna typically doesn't do well in these types of games. Just going off of historic, back to when I was there. I don't ever remember, with the exception of playing Kansas at Allen Fieldhouse close one time, us doing well in these types of games. Now you can look, and they played well in that Thanksgiving tournament one year and knocked off some big names, but that's different. That's on a neutral. On the other hand, it's an awful lot of points for a Sienna team that I think is going to win the MAC this year, Rob, and matches up kind of not too bad with Indiana. So intriguing game here. I'm extremely biased. I think Sienna's going to go out and play great tonight. They got run out by Vermont. McNamara was hey, that's what you guys need to strive to be. You want to talk about post-game quotes. He straight up said, hey guys, you want to be Vermont. That is a good basketball team. They every single year, they're at the top of their league, and they just straight up beat us tonight. That's it. There's nothing else to say. We got beat by a better team. I think Sienna responds to that a little bit. And I'm curious to see your take on this one. And we've got people disagreeing with me in the chat, so this should be a great conversation.
Well, I think if you're pointing towards Sienna, that's exactly where you point, right? You point toward the motivational level in this game. Sienna's off a bad loss. Coaches love, I don't want to say they love losing, but they love to be able to coach off of a loss. Just pointed out two coaches now with Illinois and Missouri. Those coaches love that when they can go to practice and they can, scold their team, so to speak, and let them know that these are areas we need to work. And Sienna's in that spot. Indiana's in the spot where, how interested are we in this game? Basically, we open up the season January the 4th, the Big Ten season against Washington, come off of a game against Chicago State where they kind of got, after the Kentucky loss, was that the game that they were revved up to play? Probably. Let's get back on the floor and let's destroy somebody. They didn't exactly do it. But the motivational aspect would seem to lie in Sienna's corner in this particular game. However, the problem you run into is if Indiana does want to play because they don't have another game for 12 days and maybe Coach DeVries wants to get them in tip-top form heading into the conference season, then they do everything Sienna does well at a higher level. And Sienna's a good tempo team. Indiana's a better tempo team. Indiana's a better shooting team. Indiana's a better rebounding team. Indiana's a better defensive team. All the assets that Sienna has to make them a quality team at this point at their level, Indiana does much better. And Indiana shoots the three way, way better than Sienna does. So that's your concern. If Indiana comes to play, fundamentally, we're better. We got the home court in Bloomington. How does Sienna react, et cetera, et cetera? Is it worth 22 points, 22 and a half points? I'm not so sure. It could be the way Indiana results have gone this year. And I just want to credit real quick before I turn it over to you, Adam, on the job that Darian DeVries has done so far this year with Indiana. Walk into his first real big time. I get that West Virginia is a Big 12 school, Power 5, but Indiana is a elite job due to the historical performance of this team. And what he's done is he's taken the talent. We talked about it a little bit with a couple other coaches, but he's not trying to fit the square peg into the round hole. Yes, he's brought his system. Yes, Indiana's a little bit slower. Yes, they're really good on the defensive end. But when you look at their tempo, it's not Drake tempo. It's not last year West Virginia tempo. He looks at the talent. He sees he can run a little bit with these guys. You got to let them out of the cage a little bit so they can perform up to their capabilities. And their average possession length is on the high side of average for NCAA Division I teams. And the possession length is about middle of the road. So they're playing a little bit quicker. He's taking advantage of what he has. I looked at under in this game and got scared off it because I thought, how is Sienna going to come up with enough points in this game? And if Sienna is motivated and plays decent defense, they could catch Indiana off guard. 143.5, tough number to bet under with, but if I had to, Adam, I think I would lean that way. I think this could be a little bit lower scoring.
Yeah, I agree with you. And as I listen to you talk and I watch the market here, so I'm a little bit upset with myself. This clearly got faked up, and there was a few minutes, probably, I don't know, right before we got on this show where I could have had 24 with Sienna. That's where it got bet up from 22 at the open to 24. It's back down to 22.5. I'm going to use Sienna plus 22.5 for the parlay, just because I feel like I don't know if I can give it to clients at that current number when I could have had 24, but I like it enough to have some sort of action on it. As far as your under is concerned, so a couple things here. And then Trevor, I want to respond to your comment in the chat because I think you make some good points, but I have some counterpoints there. Riley Mulvey is now back. So that is the 7-footer that Sienna got from Iowa. He's a local guy. He actually went to Iowa to play for Fran, who he grew up watching as Sienna's head coach. That's, part of the relationship there. And then he didn't play a ton at Iowa. He was a backup for Fran. Fran takes the Penn job and is kind of like, he wanted to come back home. So Trevor in the chat says, brings up the St. Bonaventure game. Well, they really needed Riley Mulvey in that game because he's a 7-footer that protects the rim. And St. Bonaventure just abused them on the inside. And he got a concussion, played 2 minutes, and he hadn't played since. He's played the last 2 games. He's back. He's not even the best big on the Sienna team. Tasman Goodrick is phenomenal. He's back. So what that means is, they're going to be able to, I think Sienna can force Indiana into some bad shots, into taking some threes. They've got these 2 sort of trees that are pretty good rim protectors, and their guards are going to defend out to the 3-point line. So I think they're going to be tougher than Indiana expects them to be defensively. The Colgate game, which I referenced in our last breakdown, is the night I realized that Sienna cannot function against the zone. Like, totally lost. They just had no clue. And then Sienna went on a run of games where they played inferior competition. Albany, Holy Cross, Longwood, American, Maine, Niagara, Canisius. Those are it doesn't matter if those teams can go into zone. Those are not good basketball teams this year for the most part. Niagara, way down. Canisius, way down. Maine is awful this year. Longwood, Griff Aldrich went to Virginia to coach with his boy Ryan Odom. They're bad. American is down from what they were last year. So, like, those are all sort of this, like whatever type results. Vermont was able to confuse them a little bit defensively, go into the zone, and Sienna had no answer. Indiana, A, doesn't really play zone, and B, is not going to care enough about Sienna to, like, alter their defense, right? Like, that's another thing you have to understand about these big, like, Indiana's not worried about, like, oh, we might have to play some zone against Sienna. They're just like, no, we're just going to play our game for 40 minutes. It might get ugly at times, but we're still good enough athletes to win this game by 12, right? Like, that's just how that's going to be. It's more important for Indiana to play their game regardless of what Sienna does, because that's the only way they get something out of this game. They're not like scheming for 24-point underdog Sienna. So because of that, I think there are ways where Sienna keeps this much closer than the spread. And Rob, your under is probably good, because Sienna covering this likely means Indiana took some bad shots, had a hard time getting into their offense, maybe settled for some threes. So I think both of those play. I would say Sienna and under, and Sienna plus 22.5 will be my leg of the parlay.
Very nice. I would just say real quick, because the way I'm wired, always looking at totals, a realistic score in this game, Adam, final score is 78, something like 78-57 is what came to my mind. That's a cover for Sienna. That's a blowout on Indiana's part. That makes the head coach happy, but it makes the bettors who play the dog happy. So that's the margin that you even have to exceed if you're betting Indiana here. It's got to be a total intensity-driven blowout of Sienna. We just don't know if Indiana's coming to the floor in Bloomington tonight, where, by the way, the crowd probably won't be as vocal because kids are home for the holiday. So maybe a little less of a home floor advantage in Bloomington tonight.
Yeah, and just talking about potential like backdoor opportunities, like Sienna really doesn't want to shoot the three. Like that's not their, with the exception of Brendan Coyle. He'll bomb it from deep, but like their best players, Gavin Doty, always wants to go off the dribble. He's not really trying to take like jumper threes. And then Goodrick on the inside has become, arguably the best offensive threat, and he plays around the rim. So if this is like foot off the gas scenario where Indiana's up 15, 18, I think there's going to be like a lot of like dribble drive, maybe easy buckets to like keep the margin close enough. So yeah, I think Sienna plus the points is good there. And Rob, I hope the boys are a little bit more competitive than your final score, but I think it's kind of realistic. 70s to 60s is what I'll call it. And I think Sienna would be pretty happy with that effort, because it's a very good Indiana team. Okay, Garth, we have some couple things I just brought up in the last on my little rant there, if you want to call it that. Although it wasn't really a rant, I wasn't upset. I was just saying, it was my breakdown of Sienna. He says thoughts on American Virginia, specifically the over 156.5. High total for a Virginia game, but American is 9-1 to the over for this year. I'm going to start this off, and then I'll let Rob hammer this home. You have to get high total for a Virginia game out of your vocabulary. Ryan Odom and Griff Aldridge are not Virginia basketball as we've known it for years and years. There is no such thing as quote-unquote high total for a Virginia game anymore. It's not a team that plays slow. It's not a team that plays pack line. It's just not. What you knew for Virginia is irrelevant going forward. This is Odom, who he's a defensive guy, Rob, but like maybe a little bit more of like a havoc style defensive guy, not like, hey, let's play like run 30 seconds off the shot clock and play this like pack line defense. And then, Aldridge's teams were up and down at Longwood, and he is the sort of his associate head coach at this point. So I wouldn't say like high total for a Virginia game. You might be onto something with American, because even though Matt Rogers is no longer there, two-time Patriot League Player of the Year, took them to the NCAA tournament last year. It's a young American team this year, which is why I was a little out on them coming into the season. But Rob, they can score a little bit. So he wants to know thoughts on the over. We're going to go to the totals guy for this one. Rob, what do you think?
Yeah, and I'm glad he asked the question, because I was very much, I dug into this one and handicapped it pretty strongly. What I'll say to Garth is there's a separation in American games so far this season. And what you want to look at is the games where they play teams that play with pace, like Virginia does. Those games all speak to over in this contest, right? American plays Wake Forest, gets to 162. They play Penn, it gets to 162. They play GW, it gets to 174. They play Longwood, it gets to 158. In between all of that, it's like an extreme schedule, right? From a totals perspective or from a matchup perspective. They play 4 snails pace teams in between all that. Maine doesn't want to go anywhere fast. Drexel doesn't want to go anywhere fast. Eastern Shore doesn't want to go anywhere fast. Sienna, who we just talked about, doesn't want to go anywhere fast. They're more defensive minded. So you got this 2 subsets of games here to choose from. I think the problem I ran into with playing over, and by the way, not only is American 9-1 full game over, their team total is 9-1 to the over as well. So it's another area you could look if you wanted to find a way to play over, which I was looking really hard to do in this game. The problem I have is that Virginia, even though they've taken on more of an offensive identity, they've played some really good offensive teams and held them down as far as current modern day college basketball is concerned. They played Butler, and Butler ends up winning 80-73. They play Texas, they hold them to 69. They play Maryland, they hold them to 72. They play Marshall, they hold them to 78. All 4 of those probably better than American, certainly better than American on the offensive end. What I like about American, if you're looking toward over in this case, is the fact that Simpkins has just pushed pace this year. You go back and look at the tempo numbers. Obviously, those of us who have followed this for a while, you remember the Jeff Jones era where they just basically scored 55. That was their game. But the tempo numbers have risen significantly this year for American. So if they're going to push, then Virginia's going to score even more. That's how you get here. I think you get to the over if, in fact, Virginia gets mid-90s or better. It's possible, because then Americans, 65, 67 gets the job done for you. So I wouldn't look under in this case. I really wouldn't, because I think Virginia can get there. And as Adam says, it's probably not a let off the gas type of team. So I'd probably still look at the over. I wish I had a better, American would have been a better kept secret if in fact it wasn't, and a better play, let's put it that way, if it wasn't Virginia today, if it was somebody else where we could just sneak in and nobody notices and play over like has been the case most of this season. Here you got a high profile team where it's noticed. The 9-1 is noticed by bettors. Subsequent move upward. I would still look a little bit over here, 156.5.
Yeah, I think I would agree with that. For me, I don't have a ton on this game. I would say it feels like that line's getting up there a little bit. So my opinion would be more toward the side. Like, again, it's weird to say, I'm not going to say anti-American, Rob. I love the United States, love this country, but I was not super high on American coming into this season because they lost seniors that had been with the program for like all 4 years. Like that's one thing that you still get in the Patriot League that is really becoming like just a foreign thing in college basketball, is that like they had guys that were like program guys. Like Matt Rogers could have easily, after he won Player of the Year, went and gone and played a year somewhere else, but he chose to come back, get American to the NCAA tournament. He had a couple of other seniors on that team last year that won the Patriot League. So like, because of that, and knowing how important that Rogers and I think they graduated like 3 guys that were all like 4-year seniors, knowing how important those guys were to the program, I was a little down on this team coming into this year, but they have played better than I expected them to, which makes me think that their young players might be able to like step in and sort of fill some of the production. So now, is that going to win them another Patriot League? Well, maybe, because the conference is atrocious. But what I'll tell you, it does help in a game like this where you open 25, it's up to 28.5. The sort of consensus would be, oh, well, American's not very good this year, probably for some of the things that I pointed out, when in reality, they haven't played half bad. So I think, like, for me, it would have to be dog or pass. That 28.5 might be tough for Virginia to cover. But definitely not I'm not super confident saying that. If I can talk someone off of laying 28.5 here, I think I've done my job, because I think there's better ways to spend your money today than trying to lay 28.5 with Virginia. Mad Max, listen, if you want to throw another game out, go ahead. And you don't have to, we appreciate the donation. If you want to throw a different game out, I'll be looking for it in the chat. You don't have to attach a donation to it, because we want to get a game for you, but we opened the show with this game. So we did Missouri, Illinois. We already broke it down. We already spent 10 minutes on it. We talked about both side and total. So you can just rewind and get that breakdown. But if you want to throw another one in the chat, go ahead, and we'll make sure we'll get your game. Bayou's talking about a game that I find quite interesting here. And we might, Bayou and I may disagree with a little bit on this one, which is rare. I also don't love disagreeing with Keith. He knows what he's talking about. But Keith says, absolutely fading Tulsa off that miracle at WKU. If you missed that game, great inbound play that led into a three-point attempt that was hit at the buzzer for Tulsa to win yet another game. Still the only loss, Rob, for this Tulsa team was inexplicably blowing that Kansas State game in the final 45 seconds. Tremendous year for Tulsa continues. It looked like Western Kentucky had them, and they bang a three at the buzzer to win the game. Bayou says kids gone for the holidays. This game was within 2 to 3 possessions. A bold take from Keith on what I believe is a 17-point spread. He says he loves this Denver offense, stud D2 guys, and a coach who keeps sneaking up on teams. So I don't disagree with the Denver love there. But man, like Tulsa's just hits, they just hit everything. Their underlying metrics don't really suggest like that they're going to have a ton of shooting regression. And now they're at home where they should get a ton of open looks against Denver. So I kind of lean Tulsa a little bit here. What ultimately kept me off was this is quite the big number. So I guess break the tie here, Rob. I like Tulsa. Keith likes Denver. How are you seeing this one? You could just play neutral and talk about the total and then not break the tie at all.
Because I can come right in the middle here, Adam, and tell you that to Bayou's point, I think the best play in this game would probably be Denver team total over. If you get that letdown situation out of Tulsa, then that shows up in the form of defense. The offense is going to go out there and, I say this all the time. In basketball, guys love to pad their numbers offensively. Defense is very few players treat defense as their priority in basketball. It's offense. So Tulsa's going to walk in, heavy favorite, should score on this Denver defense, et cetera. But off of the game against Western Kentucky, which was emotionally draining, which was physically draining, et cetera. Here comes this high-powered offense that's only asked to get you to 73 points against a team that might be somewhat disinterested. I fully believe Denver is going to get over the 72.5. In fact, it's on this little short list of mine where our parlay leg is concerned for the day. But to your point, my affection for Denver in this game comes more toward the total and their team total. I isolate it that way. I don't know, the points may be too much here. Again, if I'm speaking about potential Tulsa disinterest, then maybe you want to look toward points. I guess I just don't trust the Denver defense enough. But what I do trust is their offense. And they've been, you want to talk about hot shooting, and it's not a great schedule by any stretch of the imagination that they played. But it's 7 straight games shooting 48% from the field or better for this Denver team. And that's hard to do in practice. Never mind in games, no matter what the competition. So to me, just to answer Bayou's question real quick, I'm going to be personally on the Denver team total over 72.5, and it may show up as the parlay leg here.
Yeah, I mean, you'd almost have to think like this is equally a bad spot for Denver. So I understand like Tulsa maybe coming out a little bit flat. They just have this like they grabbed this huge road win in dramatic fashion. They basically had lost the game, and they just did a tremendous execution in the final 5 seconds to get the ball up to half court and then run just an incredible inbounds play to get an open look at a three that was nailed for the win. But Denver over the weekend pulled an upset of their own, pulled the upset. Like Tulsa's wasn't an upset. They were a favorite in that game. Tulsa did not cover that game for what it's worth against Western Kentucky. I believe they were a 3.5-point favorite. So Tulsa did not cover, even though they won that game. Denver over the weekend is like a 9-point dog. Went and won at Northern Colorado, which I know where Northern Colorado is because I passed it on my drive from the Denver airport up to Fort Collins 2 years ago. Didn't know exactly where Northern Colorado is. It's actually very close to Colorado State. You pass Greeley, like as you're pretty much maybe 20 minutes outside of 30 minutes outside of Fort Collins. So I guess I bring that up because I think there's a bit of altitude there. Now Denver, I guess Denver plays in altitude, so no big deal going up and playing a game at Northern Colorado, which is where they were over the weekend. But you talk about going on the road, getting that road win on Saturday. 2 days later, you're on the road again down in Tulsa. That's my concern for the Denver side. Is it might be an equally bad spot for them. So numbers pretty big. I think I'm with you, Rob. Points. I think there's going to be points. I don't know if it's going to be Denver. I don't know if it's going to be Tulsa, but it certainly seems that these two teams could combine to put the ball in the basket today. So I'll just call for the full game over here.
Yeah, and real quick to that point, Adam, a couple of teams that Denver's played. Arizona get whacked by 30, but still make it to 73. Seattle, who we know to be a pretty good team mid-major this year, find their way to 73. Montana State, 73. And all the rest are better than that. So, and only a few instances have they not made it to this number, whether they got crushed by the opponent or not. And I just want to say, that Northern Colorado game, Denver's last 10 minutes were sensational because they were way behind in that game. And I think they beat Northern Colorado in that one pretty soundly over the course of the last 10. I'd have to go check the exact numbers. But that back half of the second half was amazing for Denver in that game.
I got to shout out my guy, Garth. Feel for him. So he's a Western Kentucky alum. He said he was at that game, absolute highway robbery. And you got Bayou in the chat calling for the illegal screen. Yeah, they could have had an illegal pick called on that last play that kind of opened the guy up for three. But yeah, that's a tough beat for Western Kentucky. That would have been a really good win for them. So sorry that you were on the wrong side of that, Garth. Although if you took Western Kentucky in that game, which I think you liked them maybe with the points, or maybe we liked them on the show, you would have cashed that ticket. Mad Max, I'll continue to look for you in the chat. If you want to throw another game out there, we can hit a different game. But like I said, we kicked the show off with Illinois, Missouri. So as always, the show is on demand on the WagerTalk YouTube channel. If you have a chance to get over there and subscribe, drop a comment, it does help the show out immensely. We very much appreciate that. But we'll continue to move on. This is an interesting game, and I know people want to talk about some of these early tips. So Denver-Tulsa is an early tip, 3 p.m. Eastern. We have another early tip here with Seattle. They're going to play Texas San Antonio. I had a nice win on Friday night. Haven't been able to say that much in college hoop this year, although I can't lose a football play. The weirdest season Rob, it is the twilight zone, but in a I guess a half good, half bad way. I hit every football play this weekend. I had James Madison somehow covered that game, but everything goes the other way in basketball. It's got to turn at some point. Like I'm going to come on here and start giving out college basketball winners at some point, but I almost can't even get that upset because I'm having winning days because all the football plays hit. So it's like, what do you even do? I'm like third or second now on the whole site for football. I don't even really consider myself much of a football guy. I'm a basketball guy, but I'm over here just hemorrhaging in basketball. I win it back in football. It's very, very odd. Felt like a good spot to vent on that. I did have a good basketball day on Friday, and a big reason for that was my 4% play on that night was Seattle. They went in and they didn't go in. They were actually they were actually the home team. So Seattle is like doing they think they've become UConn overnight, where they play half their games at Red Hawk Arena on campus and the other half at Climate Pledge, which is like probably something that had to do with the move to the WCC, where it's like, okay, we're going to play bigger games at Climate Pledge. So the Gonzaga game, the St. Mary's game it's a way that they can host Washington. Because I don't know if you're familiar with like Red Hawk Gym. It's very, very small. It like maybe 1,000 seats on campus. So I noticed that was the case over the weekend. Here, they turn around from that huge upset win, Rob, and they go on the road for a day game down in San Antonio, Texas, against the Roadrunners of Texas San Antonio. Sean says he liked Seattle minus the points. Sean, I liked Seattle minus the points too. Even though it's not the best spot for them, I love this team. Like I played against them a couple times earlier in the year, but I have totally come around on Seattle being good. They were, of course, a team I watched very closely last year in the WAC. I had my instant reservations on if they would sort of translate being a WCC team, because of course, Rob, they kind of got the bump from like the odds makers for like being in a bigger conference now. And I was unsure if that was like legit at the beginning of the season, but now that I've watched them play enough, I can say like this team's really good. They outplayed Washington. Like that was not a fluke win. They straight up just outplayed Washington on Friday night. And Texas San Antonio doesn't create enough offense for me to think that they can hang with Seattle. So Sean, I'm with you. I would lay it if I was going to play this game with Seattle, even in a bad spot on the road. What do you think, Rob? Texas, San Antonio, Seattle this afternoon.
Well, first thing is I will comment on that Seattle-Washington game where Seattle, and it was a battle back and forth score-wise down the stretch in that game. Seattle small lead, Washington take it back. Seattle small lead, Washington press them or push them and come back and take a lead. And in the end, it was Seattle who won the tug of war, which against a Big Ten school has to open your eyes. But I think my eyes were first opened at them way back in the beginning of this show, the very first week and a half, when I was noticing Eastern Washington played close with UCLA, came back and covered again. And then they're playing Seattle, and Seattle was bet up a little bit, and Seattle absolutely destroyed EWU. Won by 27 in that game. And I'm like, well, you know what? Maybe what I saw out of Eastern Washington against UCLA, I have to apply it to Seattle. Now, since then, they've been nothing but good. The backcourt in that Washington game, these guys are pretty solid backcourt, senior tandem, but they can shoot from three. They can get to the rim. In college basketball, it's been said for 40 years, maybe more, that you win big games with guard play. Certainly Seattle has that. I don't like the spot for Seattle, but again, you have to weigh situation against fundamentals. And the fundamentals in this game, the guys that are going to be on the floor pretty much suggest that Seattle, and they're a really good defensive team too. Don't let me leave that out here, that they may, UTSA has their problem scoring. They could have problems scoring against Seattle. Defense does travel. I didn't play it, Adam. I wish it was a better spot for this Seattle team, but certainly they've shown that it's no fluke so far this season. And again, when you have a pair of guards leading the way that both shoot 42% or better or whatever it is, Arrington and Maldonado from three, then you're going to be pretty good. So I don't have a firm stance here, but I like what I've seen out of Seattle, no doubt. If the situation was a little bit better, I probably would have been there.
Yeah, it wasn't even a fluky win either, because like they were going to the rim, getting buckets, like winning on the interior. It wasn't like they just hit a bunch of like crazy shots. Like they straight up outplayed Washington. And earlier this year, they straight up outplayed Stanford. Now I know that's less impressive. Like I don't, Stanford is whatever, but like still that's two scenarios where they've outplayed a better team. And, I think for me, like what put me off was that early second week of the season, they lost at home to Cal Poly. And I already felt like their numbers were a little bit inflated coming into the year. And so like, then a couple weeks later, they were a super like sharp, like, darling, if you will, right? Like where like all the sharp guys were on Seattle, and they lost to UC Santa Barbara out in a neutral court in Vegas. And I was like, okay, like maybe this team's a little bit fraudulent. I actually played against them last week with UC Davis because again, they were going on the road. I covered that game, but they won by 1. And that was kind of like, I watched that entire game. I was like, you know what? I think I got a little lucky to win that game. Davis hit a couple big shots late. I think I'm back with Seattle, and they were so impressive against Washington. And I've seen enough now that I don't think I'm playing against the Red Hawks anytime soon. So this would be a matchup that I think, like, the matchup tells me that they should crush this team. They should absolutely bury Texas San Antonio. Like, they're going to generate very little offense. Scoring points is going to be a struggle for them most likely. And Seattle, when they're cooking, can fill it up. So that, to me, right there tells me that a 2-point game could become a 10-point game very, very quickly. And you're good. I mean, if you can get it up to double digits, you're going to cash this bet, because I believe even after the move, the spread is, what are we looking at for a number on this one right now, Rob? Like 9.5? Is it still like 8.5 or 9.5?
Get up to the early matchups.
Yeah,
8.5. I see 8.5 across the board, really universally.
Yeah, I feel like this is a double-digit Seattle win, unless they straight up come out and just are just not interested. But I just don't think that's going to be the case. They're not a big enough name to be not interested in like a game like this. You know, I mean, they're just, it's not like, I don't think that that's the attitude of this Seattle team. And Chris Victor is a really good coach. He might be the next coach that ends up getting a big job out of that league. Since we know like Mark Few and Randy Bennett won't go anywhere. Like, if I was to pick a West Coast Conference coach, because every year there's one that like overachieves and takes a bigger job, I think it's going to be Chris Victor from Seattle this year, and I like Seattle in that game. Okay, back to the chat. Let's see what oh, here's Matt. Okay, Mad Max is back. Let's get him in here. He says Memphis is on a 3-game losing streak. Alabama State pulled an upset as a 19-point dog versus UAB. Yeah, shout out Tony Matlock. Is that the coach, Rob? Former Memphis guy, right? I'll leave that for you, because there's a little storyline there, right? Alabama State playing Memphis. Alabama State covered 2 of 3 as sizable dogs. Memphis turns the ball over a lot. Not a great defensive rebounding team. Kick us off. Alabama State and Memphis. Do you think the big dog has any bark in it today in this one?
We just had this. Well, it had to have been Alabama. Wasn't Nate Oates playing one of his assistants last week, I believe?
Yes,
maybe
it was,
Hodgson, right? Hodgson, South Florida?
Yes. Yeah, South
right?
Florida covered that number too.
Yeah, so it's always, you know, if Alabama won that game, they were never really in trouble, but South Florida did cover the number. It went way over. I guess that's because that's where my interest was in that game. That's what I was paying attention to, the point scoring. But it is always a 20/20 hindsight thing, head coach or disciple. Which way do you want to stand? I would probably lean, you know, you hate to play Memphis as a favorite. Let me start there. Memphis just doesn't fit the profile of a team that covers a lot of games as a sizable favorite under Penny Hardaway. You like them more when they're an attractive underdog that can match up personnel-wise and is somewhat overlooked. Here, however, if you're Alabama State, do you get up for 2 games in a row? Like meeting an in-state team that's in a classification level higher than yours. Obviously, UAB, a mid-major, Alabama State, a significant low major. It's hard to play 2 games back-to-back of that magnitude would be my counterpoint to not wanting to play Memphis. For me, it would be a no play. I think you could maybe look for toward the total here. And my thought process there would probably be to look toward under. I just feel like the Memphis personnel against this type of opponent shows up really good defensively. And I don't know what Alabama State can score here. So maybe a slight lean toward the under in this particular instance, but I don't know. You can hear in my voice a little bit of a counter argument for the side. Don't like Memphis in this price range as a favorite. Don't like the thought of Alabama State being able to play 2 in a row like the one they just played. It's got to be like winning the Super Bowl when you beat a team within the state that's, you know, considered a big brother to you. So I would probably leave side alone and maybe take a slight look toward the total under.
Yeah, I'm just pulling up. Yeah, so it's Tony Madlock, the coach of Alabama State, Madlock. And yeah, so he were him and Penny teammates? I think they were, right? Like, weren't him and Penny teammates at Memphis? He was
They
there
might
from
have crossed
89.
paths there.
So
Well,
he was
that
there
makes
from
sense, yes.
89 to 92. So the reason I'm bringing it up is like I'm pretty sure these teams have started to play each year. Yes, Madlock was at Memphis 89 to 92. I'm pretty sure that was right around the same time Penny was there. The reason is it's almost got like a college teammate Penny Hardaway. So it's almost got like a Tom Izzo, the one we just saw the other day, Greg Campy type feel where like I think these two coaches are friends. They're on good terms. I don't know that Penny really wants to like go out and embarrass, like I don't think the goal, if you've watched a lot of these Michigan State Oakland games, and there was one the other day, I feel like Oakland's covered quite a bit lately because like there's not, if it comes to it, like at the end of the game, I don't think Izzo runs the score up on Campy. And I would almost say the same thing with Memphis. Like if it's like a 13-point game, 15-point game, 16-point game, I don't know that Penny is like hell bent on going for the knockout punch on his buddy. So that right there has me leaning toward the dog. The other thing that sort of tilts me toward the I guess that would this actually makes the other argument. Like if this game was 2 months ago or 6 weeks ago, I'd be all about Alabama State. But we've had this conversation a couple of times. The SWAC mid-December, when you get to this part in the schedule, I mean, you wonder how much some of these SWAC schools have left in the tank with how much travel and just how many of these like sort of high, like step up bye games they've had to play. Alabama State has not played a single D1 home game yet this year. Their only home game was November 14th against a non-D1 opponent. I mean, just in the past month, they've gone to Indy for a couple of games. They've gone to New Mexico, right? Missouri, Cincinnati. Now they're going to play Memphis. It's like you just have to wonder if they're like a little worn out at this point. But then again, does that even like you can always it's much easier to get up for Memphis if you're Alabama State than it is if you're Memphis to like get up for Alabama State. I meant it the other way around. It's easier for Alabama State to get themselves up, even though they might be tired, to play a team like Memphis than it is vice versa. So with those two things, I think I slightly lean the dog, but man, I would have loved this spot for Alabama State if this was 4 weeks ago and they were a little bit, it wasn't right at the end of this like really grueling non-conference season. So Max, you do make a good point. I mean, Alabama State got up for the UAB game and won it. So, maybe they've got that in them, but we'll see. It should be an interesting game. I lean the dog. All right, Steve, we're going to go to Rob because this is a team that he was high on coming into the season. And, UC Santa Barbara, Rob, they didn't start off the season like you'd like to see. Recently, they've suffered with the injury to Miro Little, which has hurt them, in my opinion. But they have what some could consider a get-right spot of sorts today against Portland. So the question everyone wants to know is, does UC Santa Barbara get right today, and can they cover this number?
Well, again, when guys ask questions on sides, I apologize for not looking towards side first in these games. That's just I'm wired to go immediately toward total. In this particular instance, I kind of like this game to show up as an over. For what it's worth, UC Santa Barbara hasn't looked the part offensively lately, but they get an opponent in their wheelhouse here in Portland where their shooting capabilities, I think it's hidden a little bit, Adam. Utah Valley's a tremendous defensive team that probably doesn't get the credit for being as good a defensive team as they are. Then, of course, they played that game, and Gottlieb's press conference after the Wisconsin-Green Bay game against Santa Barbara was where he basically said, I'm giving up my radio show, and I'm going to devote, these kids deserve my time, and it was off of that win. So congratulations to him for dedicating himself totally to the team. But my point being that it's been 2 consecutive low-scoring games for Santa Barbara, which is a very good shooting team, and they don't play a lot of three-point defense. I think a couple of those things add up here against Portland, which will play with a ton of pace. We're going to get the possessions here. that Santa Barbara didn't get against Utah Valley, that they didn't shoot well against Green Bay. I think all of those things in a bounce back form, big bounce back guy, I think lead me toward over in this game. Apologize for not being able to help as much where the side is concerned, but my eyes were drawn first to maybe a potential overplay here. And real quick, Adam, as I look at the clock, let me go ahead and give a parlay leg here because we have 4 minutes. And I know you're already in. So the choices, again, guys, there's been a couple of days where I come on here and say, you know what, I'm down to like 2 or 3 choices, and I just rattle them all off to you. The last 2 on the card here were both team totals. I'll pick one. I'll tell you first that one of them was IU Indianapolis to get over the 71.5 against.
Well, Rob,
Grand
go talk about that game because Garth donated. He wants the IU Indy Grand Canyon game. Can you just give us a few words on that one or what you thought there for him?
I will real quick. The IU Indianapolis team total appealed to me just because Grand Canyon came off of that big win against Wyoming a couple of days ago. And I just don't, we've talked about disinterest a couple of times in the show, and I just don't know that the focus level will be the same as it was for that Wyoming game. That was a really good mid-major game, and Grand Canyon dominated defensively for the most part, a really good Wyoming team. That's what they're predicated on defense this year. IU Indianapolis predicated on offense. I just think this is kind of the same analysis that we used earlier. In a letdown situation, what goes first a little bit is the defense. IU Indianapolis is going to run up and down the floor. You're going to get your share of possessions. They're asked to get the 72 points in this game. I think they will. So for Garth, that's my very quick analysis as we're up against the clock here on that one. Yeah.
Yeah, before you lock your parlay in, because we only have like 3 minutes left, what I'll say to Garth, just to wrap that up, I lean toward the big spread for reasons that Rob said. Grand Canyon goes on the road, gets a win at Wyoming. That's a really good win for them. I didn't really expect them to win that game. I don't think this Grand Canyon team is even close to what their market rating is. Now they have to come home and lay 25.5 to a team that's going to go fast and try to score a little bit. I would say that spread is too big. So Garth, I'm with you on the side. It seems like a big spread. Just wanted to wrap that game up. I didn't know we were going to talk about that one right there, but all right, go ahead, Rob. What are you looking at for the parlay?
Real quick, backdoor is always open for IU Indy to do something at the end. So I'm going to go with a fan favorite here, at least one of mine. In no sense not playing Northridge, Adam. Northridge team total tonight against Sacramento State is 86.5. And I mean, they came all the way cross country to Delaware, where the money couldn't get to Delaware fast enough on a Saturday morning. Bad time slot for a West Coast team. What are they doing making this trip, et cetera, et cetera. And I looked at their team total in that game and I said, are you serious? There's no way Northridge doesn't get, maybe even if they don't play the first 20, there's no way, because they're so capable of a 50-point half at any time. There's no way they don't get there. They played a great first half. They got there easily. I think very quickly that they get there easily again tonight against a Sacramento State team that doesn't hit the boards defensively, which means a lot of second chances for Northridge. Adam, we've talked about the way Northridge can put the ball in the bucket quite a bit this season. They've come through for us a couple of times. I'm going to ask them to do it again. This team total is 86.5. So I'm going to play Cal State Northridge up and over 86.5, figuring against this defensively weak Sacramento State team that they can get to 87.
Yeah, you talk about their rebounding quick. Prophet Johnson did not play over the weekend. 8.7 rebounds per game. Bear Cherry has been out. 8.2 rebounds per game. So they've basically been out without their 2 best rebounders. I thought the number was big. Northridge should crush this team. Like, they should win by 15 to 20 points here. And I think you're going to hit your team total. And if you hit your team total and my Sienna boys come through tonight, then we'll hit another parlay. Parlays are back. I think we're up over 3 units now. So today's parlay, as we sort of scramble to get off in time for the next show, Sienna plus 22.5, Northridge team total over 86.5. Hopefully we cash another one today. We'll be back tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., more full court press. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. We'll see you guys tomorrow.